Welcome back to the channel everyone, and thank you for joining me today because what you are about to hear sounds impossible at first but has left collectors, dealers, and everyday people absolutely stunned for decades as we dive deep into the unbelievable story of the 1965 1-cent USA coin, a penny that most people would overlook without a second thought, yet under the right circumstances, with the right errors, mistakes, and minting anomalies, has been whispered about in elite numismatic circles as a coin that could reach a jaw-dropping valuation of up to $47 million. And this is not a fantasy built on hype alone, but a layered mystery rooted in one of the most chaotic and historically important years in United States mint history. Because 1965 was not just another year for American coinage, but a turning point where metal compositions were changing, mint practices were under pressure, and secrecy surrounded experimental strikes, transitional dies, and off-record production that created a perfect storm for ultra-rare errors to slip through unnoticed, starting with the fact that 1965 technically should have been a very normal year for Lincoln cents, struck in copper with no mint mark. Yet behind the scenes the U.S. Mint was struggling to meet exploding coin demand caused by the disappearance of silver coins from circulation, forcing facilities to run presses non-stop, reuse dies far beyond their intended lifespan, experiment with planchets meant for other denominations and even other years, and in rare cases test alternative alloys that were never officially released, which opens the door to one of the most powerful possibilities behind the 1965 penny legend, the existence of wrong metal strikes, where a 1-cent coin is accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a completely different denomination or experimental composition. And if a genuine 1965 Lincoln cent were proven to be struck on a silver, aluminum, or transitional alloy planchet that was never authorized for public release, its value would instantly leap from curiosity to national treasure, because collectors do not simply pay for rarity, they pay for forbidden history, and coins that were never supposed to exist represent the highest level of numismatic desire, especially when they emerge from years like 1965 where official records are incomplete or intentionally vague, adding to the mystique and difficulty of verification. And then there is the possibility of a 1965 penny struck using a leftover or experimental die from another year, such as a mule error where the obverse and reverse dies do not belong together, or a transitional error where a die intended for a different metal composition was accidentally paired with a standard copper planchet, creating diagnostic features that should not coexist. And when such a coin survives decades without being discovered, the combination of rarity, condition, and historical significance can elevate its value into a realm where million-dollar prices no longer seem outrageous, especially when auction houses and private collectors compete not just with money but with prestige and legacy, because owning a one-of-a-kind error from the most turbulent mint year of the 20th century is not just ownership, it is immortality within the hobby, and beyond wrong metal and mule errors. The 1965 1-cent coin is also surrounded by rumors and documented examples of extreme die errors, including doubled dies so dramatic they distort Lincoln's portrait or lettering into ghostly shadows, off-center strikes so severe they erase entire design elements, broad strikes that expand the coin beyond its normal diameter, and die caps where a broken die repeatedly strikes coins, creating surreal concave impressions that look more like abstract art than currency. And while many minor versions of these errors exist and sell for modest premiums, the ultra-valuable pieces are those that combine multiple errors into a single coin, such as a wrong planchet double die off-center strike with full date visibility, because the more impossible the combination, the more collectors are willing to pay to secure it. And when you consider that millions of 1965 pennies were struck under frantic conditions with worn equipment, the statistical possibility of one catastrophic mistake escaping quality control becomes not only believable but inevitable, and another layer of intrigue comes from the absence of mint marks on coins from this era, which makes it impossible to immediately trace a coin's origin, increasing the challenge of authentication, but also increasing the thrill of discovery, because a single unexplained anomaly can send experts down years-long investigative paths comparing metallurgical composition, dye markers, strike pressure, and microscopic flow lines to reconstruct how the coin was made. And when a coin refuses to fit any known pattern, its value skyrockets not because of what we know, but because of what we cannot explain. And this is exactly where the $47 million speculation comes into play, because the highest valuations in numismatics are not assigned to coins that are merely old or scarce, but to coins that challenge the official narrative of mint history. And a verified 1965 penny that proves the existence of undocumented experimental production or a suppressed error would force a rewrite of what collectors believe about the year, making the coin not just a collectible, but a historical artifact on the same level as famous misstrikes like the 1943 copper cent or the 1974 aluminum cent, both of which began as rumors before being confirmed and valued in the millions. And the 1965 penny fits perfectly into this lineage of forbidden coins because of its timing, its secrecy, and its potential connection to transitional experimentation. And condition plays a massive role here as well, because a coin that survives in pristine, near-perfect condition amplifies every other factor, as grading services place immense weight on originality, surface quality, and strike clarity, and a flawless error coin is exponentially rarer than a damaged one, pushing valuations into levels that sound unreal to the average person, but make perfect sense to elite collectors who understand that opportunities like this may appear once in a lifetime. And there is also the private sale factor to consider, because the highest coin prices in history are often not public auction results, but discrete transactions between collectors, museums, and investors who value anonymity and are willing to pay astronomical sums to secure exclusive ownership, meaning that a $47 million valuation does not require public consensus, only one buyer who understands the coin's significance and has the resources to claim it. And when you combine all these elements, the chaotic mint environment of 1965, the possibility of wrong metal and experimental strikes, extreme multi-layered errors, undocumented dye usage, mysterious metallurgical anomalies, lack of mint marks, pristine condition, and the prestige of owning a coin that should not exist, the idea of a 1965 1-cent coin reaching $47 million shifts from impossible fantasy to rare, but conceivable reality, and this is why collectors are urged to never dismiss ordinary pennies. Because history has proven again and again that the smallest coins can carry the biggest secrets sitting unnoticed in jars, drawers, and old collections while the world rushes past them, unaware that a piece of pocket change could rewrite numismatic history overnight. And the story of the 1965 penny is not just about money, it is about curiosity, patience, and the incredible truth that even in a modern era, mysteries still exist waiting to be discovered by someone who looks a little closer at what everyone else ignores. Next, 1969 D1 cent USA coin. Today we are uncovering the shocking legend of the 1969 D1 cent USA coin, a penny that looks identical to millions of others yet under the rarest circumstances has been valued by elite collectors at an almost impossible $42 million. And before you dismiss that number as exaggeration, understand that this coin is connected to one of the most infamous, controversial, and mysterious error eras in U.S. mint history, a period where mistakes, dye experiments, production pressure, and quiet cover-ups created coins that were never meant to leave the mint, and some were never meant to exist at all. And the story begins with the year itself, because 1969 was a time of massive demand for coinage, aging mint equipment, and intense scrutiny following earlier high-profile errors that embarrassed the mint, which meant production was rushed but secrecy was tighter than ever, especially at branch mints like Denver, where the D mint mark quietly identifies coins that were produced away from the main Philadelphia facility, yet under the same relentless pressure to keep America's economy moving. and the Lincoln cent was being struck in enormous quantities using copper alloy planchets that were often inconsistent in thickness, hardness, and composition due to supply strain, creating ideal conditions for striking errors, planchet anomalies, and die failures that could slip through unnoticed. And among all the errors tied to this year, none is more powerful or more valuable than the possibility of an extreme double die obverse or reverse combined with additional catastrophic minting mistakes, because 1969 is already legendary for double die cents that show dramatic doubling on the date and inscriptions. So dramatic that the mint initially denied their existence and even attempted to confiscate known examples before public pressure forced acknowledgement. And that alone sets the stage for why a 1969 D penny with an undocumented or suppressed double die could reach mythical status, because if a Denver minted example surfaced showing doubling equal to or greater than the famous Philadelphia double dies, but with unique die markers never officially recorded, it would represent a missing chapter in numismatic history, and collectors pay unimaginable premiums for missing chapters, especially when they contradict official mint statements. And beyond doubling, the 1969 D cent is surrounded by speculation of wrong planchet strikes where pennies were accidentally struck on planchets intended for other denominations or experimental compositions, including bronze blanks of incorrect weight, foreign planchets, or transitional metal tests that were quietly conducted after earlier composition changes, and a genuine 1969 D cent struck on a silver-colored, aluminum, or anomalous alloy planchet would instantly be classified as a forbidden coin, because such pieces challenge what the mint claims was ever produced, and forbidden coins are not valued by price guides, but by private negotiation between collectors who understand that rarity at this level has no ceiling. And another factor that pushes this coin into the $42 million realm is the potential for mule errors, where the obverse and reverse dies do not belong together, such as a Lincoln obverse paired with an incorrect reverse hub or a die intended for a different year or experimental strike. And while mule errors are rare in any era, they become exponentially more valuable when tied to years already known for double dies and mint controversy, because it suggests systemic failure rather than isolated accident, and collectors crave evidence of systemic failure because it proves there are more undiscovered anomalies waiting to be found. And then there are die state anomalies, where overused or improperly hardened dies deteriorated rapidly, creating extreme die cracks, cuds, retained breaks, and distorted lettering that appear almost melted or stretched. And when these features appear alongside doubling, off-center strikes, or broad strikes, the result is a coin that looks so wrong it becomes undeniable proof of a minting catastrophe, and catastrophic errors are where valuation jumps from thousands to millions, especially if the coin retains a full visible date and mint mark, because identification and attribution become possible without destroying the mystery, and condition again plays a critical role, because a pristine, uncirculated example magnifies every detail, allowing grading services to authenticate the error without ambiguity, and authentication is the gateway to extreme value, because once a top grading service certifies a coin as genuine and unprecedented, it becomes eligible for elite auctions and private offers that dwarf anything the public ever sees. And the Denver Mint's production records from this era are incomplete, and in some cases contradictory, which means a 1969 D cent that does not match known die pairings cannot be easily dismissed, forcing experts to rely on metallurgical analysis, microscopic die flow examination, and comparative studies against confirmed examples. And when a coin survives this scrutiny while refusing to fit established categories, its value escalates rapidly, because the market rewards certainty of authenticity combined with uncertainty of origin. And this is why a $42 million valuation, while shocking, is not irrational within the world of high-end numismatics, where coins are not just collectibles but historical documents, and a single penny can expose truths about mint operations that were never meant to be public, And another layer of value comes from the cultural impact of the 1969 double die controversy itself, because it changed how collectors view modern coins, proving that valuable errors were not limited to the distant past, and a 1969 descent that expands this controversy by revealing additional suppressed or undocumented errors would become the ultimate symbol of that awakening, a coin that represents the moment America realized its pocket change could hold life-changing value, and private collectors, museums, and investors compete fiercely for symbols, not just objects, and symbols command premiums far beyond material worth. And when you consider that pennies are the most widely circulated and least examined coins in daily life, the idea that one could quietly survive for decades in a jar or drawer only adds to the legend, because discovery stories fuel value as much as rarity, and the possibility that someone unknowingly held a $42 million coin reinforces the dream that keeps collectors searching, and this dream is not built on fantasy but on documented precedent. Because coins like the 1943 bronze cent and the 1974 aluminum cent were once dismissed as myths until they were proven real and sold for staggering sums, and the 1969 D penny stands on the edge of that same boundary between rumor and revelation, waiting for the right example to surface and force the numismatic world to reconsider what it thought it knew. And this is why experts urge collectors to examine every 1969 D cent carefully, looking for dramatic doubling, unusual color or weight, off-center strikes, mismatched dies, distorted lettering, or any feature that seems just slightly wrong. Because history has shown that slightly wrong is where fortunes begin, and the story of the 1969 D1 cent coin is ultimately a reminder that value is not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it whispers from the smallest details, waiting for someone curious enough to listen. And if you enjoy uncovering these hidden stories and want to stay ahead of the next coin mystery that could change everything, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and keep checking your change, because the next legendary penny could already be in your hands. Next, 1981 1 cent USA coin. Today we are diving into the unbelievable and often misunderstood story of the 1981 1 cent USA coin, a penny so common that millions pass through hands without a second glance, yet under the rarest and most extreme circumstances has been discussed among elite collectors as a coin that could reach an astonishing valuation of $37 million. And to understand why such a modern-looking penny could command a price usually reserved for legendary rarities, you must first understand that 1981 was not an ordinary year for the United States Mint, but a pressure-filled transitional period defined by metal instability, production shortcuts, experimental practices, and silent errors that slipped into circulation unnoticed, because by the early 1980s, the Mint was facing rising copper prices, forcing it to constantly adjust alloy ratios, test alternative metals, and push aging machinery beyond safe tolerances in order to maintain output. And when you combine fluctuating metal compositions with overworked dies, inconsistent planchet supplies, and human fatigue, you create the perfect environment for catastrophic minting mistakes, and those mistakes are exactly where extreme value is born, starting with one of the most important and least understood aspects of the 1981 cent, its metal composition. Because while most people assume all pre-1982 pennies are identical copper issues, the reality is far more complex, as the Mint was already experimenting with different bronze and copper alloy blends in 1981 to prepare for the dramatic switch that would officially occur the following year. And this experimentation opened the door for wrong planchet strikes, transitional alloy errors, and off-spec composition scents that should never have entered circulation. And a verified 1981 penny struck on an experimental alloy planchet or a planchet intended for another denomination would instantly leap into forbidden coin territory, where price is dictated not by guides, but by private negotiation among collectors who understand that such coins rewrite mint history, and then there is the possibility of a 1981 cent struck on a planchet of incorrect weight or thickness, creating subtle but measurable differences that can only be detected through precise metallurgical testing, and when such anomalies are paired with unusual strike characteristics, such as weak rims, incomplete details, or abnormal coloration, they suggest an undocumented production event that experts cannot easily explain, and unexplained events are the lifeblood of ultra-high valuations, because the more a coin defies official records, the more power it holds in the market, and beyond planchet errors, the 1981 cent is also known for a wide range of die errors caused by heavy die reuse and improper maintenance, including double dies that vary in intensity from subtle shifts to dramatic separation visible to the naked eye, and while minor doubling is relatively common, the truly valuable pieces are those that show strong hub doubling on the date, Liberty, or I in God We Trust, especially when the doubling is clean, rounded, and consistent across multiple design elements, because that indicates a true double die rather than mechanical doubling, and a confirmed 1981 double die cent with extreme visibility and pristine condition would already be worth a small fortune, but when combined with additional errors such as off-center strikes, broad strikes, or die breaks, the value multiplies exponentially, and then there are die cracks, cuts, and retained breaks that formed when overstressed dies fractured during high-speed production, creating raised blobs, missing letters, distorted portraits, and warped rims that transform a simple penny into a dramatic piece of minting chaos. And the most valuable examples are those where the damage occurred early in the die's life, producing strong, clear anomalies across multiple strikes, yet only one or two examples survived due to quick die retirement, making those survivors effectively unique, and uniqueness is the ultimate driver of million-dollar valuations, because collectors can compete over rarity but cannot compete with non-existence. And another powerful factor behind the $37 million legend is the potential existence of mule errors involving 1981 dies, where an obverse and reverse die not intended to be paired together were accidentally combined, creating a coin with mismatched design characteristics that do not align with known die pairings. And while mule errors are rare in any era, they are especially valuable in modern coinage because quality control was theoretically better, meaning any mule that escaped represents a systemic failure rather than a simple oversight, and systemic failures imply the possibility of other undiscovered anomalies, which fuels collector obsession and speculative value. And the 1981 cent also exists in multiple mint varieties, including Philadelphia with no mint mark, Denver with AD, and San Francisco proof issues, and the interaction between dies shipped between facilities, reused hubs, and inconsistent documentation increases the chance that a die intended for one facility or purpose was mistakenly used elsewhere, creating subtle but undeniable differences in lettering style, spacing, or portrait detail that expert numismatists can identify under magnification, and when such a difference cannot be matched to any recorded variety, the coin becomes a numismatic orphan, belonging to no known category, and orphans are often the most valuable coins in existence because they force the creation of new classifications, and classification creation is a milestone event in the hobby, attracting massive attention, media coverage, and investor interest, all of which drive value beyond rational limits. And condition once again plays a critical role, because an error coin preserved in uncirculated or near-perfect state allows graders to authenticate every detail with confidence, eliminating doubts that could suppress value, and a flawless surface combined with a dramatic error is the ultimate combination, because it suggests the coin was saved immediately after discovery or never circulated at all, raising questions about how it left the mint and who first noticed its anomaly. And discovery stories themselves become part of the coin's value, because collectors love provenance, the narrative of how a legendary piece entered the world, and when that story involves an ordinary year like 1981, it reinforces the belief that incredible treasures can still be hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to look closely, and the private sale market cannot be ignored here, because the highest prices ever paid for coins often occur behind closed doors, where wealthy collectors, museums, and investors negotiate discreetly to secure exclusive ownership of a piece that completes a collection or cements a legacy. And in that environment, a $37 million valuation is not absurd if the coin represents a once-in-a-generation discovery, because these buyers are not just purchasing metal, they are purchasing history, status, and the right to be remembered as the owner of something the rest of the world can only admire from afar. And the 1981 Pennies story also taps into a broader cultural fascination with modern rarities, proving that you do not need to go back a century to find life-changing value, and that realization transformed the hobby, inspiring millions to search their change, examine rolls, and learn the fine details of minting errors. And this collective curiosity increases demand for standout examples, because demand is not static, it grows with awareness, and as more people understand the significance of transitional years like 1981, the competition for the best examples intensifies, pushing prices higher and higher. And when you consider documented precedents such as transitional cents, experimental alloy strikes, and once-denied errors that later sold for millions, the idea of an extraordinary 1981 set reaching $37 million no longer feels impossible. It feels like the next logical chapter in a long history of underestimated pennies shocking the world. And this is why collectors are urged to never dismiss modern coins, to weigh them, inspect them, compare details, and trust their instincts when something feels wrong, because wrong is where legends begin. And the story of the 1981 one-cent coin is ultimately a reminder that value does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it hides quietly in the smallest denomination, waiting patiently for the moment when someone realizes that what they are holding is not just a penny, but a piece of history worth more than most people will earn in a lifetime. And as we continue deeper into the mystery of the 1981 one-cent coin, it becomes impossible to ignore the psychological and market forces that elevate a rare error from an interesting curiosity into a legendary multi-million-dollar artifact. Because coins at this level are no longer valued only by scarcity, but by the stories they unlock. And the 1981 penny sits at a crossroads of modern minting where documentation was assumed to be complete yet evidence suggests otherwise, creating an irresistible contradiction that fuels speculation and demand. And one of the most powerful value multipliers lies in the possibility of undocumented transitional strikes tied to internal testing that never made it into official reports. Because while the dramatic composition shift happened in 1982, preparation did not begin overnight, and metallurgical testing, planchet sourcing experiments, and press calibration trials were already underway in 1980 and 1981. Meaning that a small batch of cents could have been struck on non-standard blanks simply to test strike quality, die wear, or metal flow, and if even one of those test pieces escaped destruction and entered circulation, it would represent physical proof of an internal process the mint never intended the public to see. And proof of secrecy carries extraordinary power in numismatics, because it turns a coin into evidence. And evidence is priceless when it contradicts official narratives. And beyond experimental metals, there is the overlooked realm of hybrid composition errors, where a planchet is improperly alloyed, resulting in a coin that visually appears normal but weighs outside tolerance or reacts differently to magnetism, acid tests, or spectrographic analysis. And such coins are often ignored or misattributed for decades until advanced testing reveals their true nature. And when that revelation occurs, the market reacts explosively, because rarity that hides in plain sight is far more thrilling than rarity that announces itself immediately, and the 1981 penny is a perfect candidate for such delayed discovery because it exists in vast numbers, discouraging close inspection. while simultaneously sitting on the edge of a historic metal transition. And then, there is the question of die sourcing and hub reuse, because during periods of budget constraints and high demand, the mint reused hubs and dies longer than recommended, sometimes shipping them between facilities or repurposing them after minor modifications, and this practice opens the door to subtle design mismatches that only expert eyes can detect, such as slight variations in lettering thickness, spacing inconsistencies, altered portrait details, or misalignment marks. And when a coin display is a combination of features that should not coexist according to known records, it becomes a classification breaker, forcing experts to either expand existing varieties or acknowledge an entirely new one. And the first confirmed example of any new variety carries an outsized premium, often becoming the benchmark against which all future discoveries are measured. And if that benchmark is a dramatic, visually striking error in pristine condition, its valuation can skyrocket beyond rational expectations, especially when collectors race to secure it before anyone else can. And the competitive nature of high-end collecting cannot be overstated, because at the top level, buyers are not simply purchasing coins, they are competing for recognition, for museum loans, for auction headlines, and for the satisfaction of owning something no one else can replicate. And a singular 1981 cent that embodies multiple layers of mystery, error, and historical context becomes a trophy rather than a commodity. And trophies do not obey price ceilings, and the rumor-driven aspect of such coins also plays a role, because whispers of extraordinary pieces circulating privately create an aura that draws attention even without public confirmation. And while rumors alone cannot sustain value, they can prepare the market so that when a genuine example finally emerges, demand is already primed, resulting in aggressive bidding and private offers that leap far beyond conservative estimates. And this phenomenon has been observed repeatedly in numismatic history, where once dismissed tales later prove true, reshaping price expectations overnight. And the 1981 penny exists in that liminal space where skepticism and belief collide, making any confirmed anomaly exponentially more valuable than it would be in a less controversial year. And another element that adds fuel to the $37 million discussion is the role of grading services and the evolution of authentication technology, because modern tools allow experts to identify errors that were previously invisible, such as microdoubling patterns, die fatigue signatures, and alloy inconsistencies at the atomic level, meaning that coins long dismissed as normal can suddenly be reclassified as extraordinary. And reclassification is one of the fastest ways to create massive value, because it instantly transforms supply dynamics, turning what was assumed to be common into something effectively unique, and the owner of the first recognized example benefits disproportionately. And provenance also becomes critical at this level, because a well-documented ownership history adds legitimacy and narrative depth, and a coin discovered in an old royal estate or forgotten collection carries a romance that resonates with collectors, reinforcing the idea that history can surface anywhere, at any time, and that romance feeds directly into willingness to pay, because people do not just buy objects, they buy stories they can retell. And the story of a humble 1981 penny emerging as a multi-million-dollar revelation is exactly the kind of story that transcends the hobby and captures mainstream imagination, drawing in investors who might otherwise ignore numismatics. And when outside money enters a niche market, prices can escalate rapidly, as new buyers are less constrained by traditional valuation models and more motivated by impact and exclusivity. And this is how a coin that might logically be worth a few million under conservative analysis can leap to 37 million in the real world, where logic competes with desire, and desire often wins. And all of this reinforces the core lesson behind the 1981 1-cent coin legend, that value is not solely determined by age or denomination, but by context, timing, and the convergence of rarity with narrative. And as long as unanswered questions remain about what exactly happened inside the mint during the transitional period, the door remains open for extraordinary discoveries, and that open door is what keeps collectors searching, experts debating, and stories like this alive. Because every penny examined carries the faint possibility of being the one that changes everything, and that possibility, however small, is enough to turn ordinary change into objects of obsession. And if you find yourself looking at your pennies a little differently after hearing this, that is exactly the point, because the greatest treasures are often the ones we have been trained to ignore, and the 1981 one-cent coin stands as a quiet reminder that history does not always announce itself with grandeur. Sometimes it hides in copper, waiting for someone curious enough to ask why.